is just like crazy. He was 16 when
Yeah.
he started faking being a pilot, and then he was like, "Oh, well, actually, now I'm a pediatrician. Oh yeah, I went to Harvard Law as well, and now I'm a lawyer. Oh yes, also I used to teach at New York College, and I will teach this sociology course." And then like he almost gets married a couple times, goes to Mexico, gets wins like 50 grand in Vegas, goes to the
Yeah.
UK, goes to Paris,
I
like
read the
runs.
book.
Oh, it's crazy.
I read the book and I saw the movie and I've seen the musical. So I've seen it in multiple
I
forms.
didn't know there was a musical.
Yes, there is a Catch Me If You Can musical.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Most things have a musical.
I guess so. I mean, if that does, then it's not
Well,
the kind
there's
of thing that like
currently,
catches me as like, oh,
speaking of Leo DiCaprio vehicles, there is currently a Great Gatsby musical playing at the
okay.
Paper Mill Playhouse, which is where like shows go to get picked up and hopefully go to Broadway.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we'll see. Did you like my episode title?
Yes, absolutely.
Gales versus Dales.
100%. That's why they got matched up against each other.
Of course, it couldn't have been their style
Yeah.
of play,
No,
which
it's very different.
is
But
very different.
both are really fucking good at guitar, which is all that matters.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
That's
It was there is no denying the talent.
no.
Again, you can question some of the decisions for some, but that's okay. Uh, you're up first.
Correct.
I have the notes.
Africa second. Asia third, maybe.
Sure, that sounds about right.
Whatever.
Who cares about the order? I'm sure you did not see this, but I think it will tickle you.
Is it a feather?
Jason Kelsey, it is a feather. Jason Kelsey, center for the Philadelphia Eagles,
I've heard of him.
was a finalist
Fair.
for People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive this year.
I love it.
Amazing. I was like, this is perfect.
Yes.
Let's go.
I hope he does become mayor someday. I think he will.
Oh,
if he had any sort of aspirations to do it.
Oh,
instantly.
I'm sure.
As long as he ran as a Democrat, obviously, because this is Philadelphia.
That is accurate.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'm ready.
Excellent. Well, then I'll hit the button if 3, 2, 1.
Bow now 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 now. Bow now 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 bow.
Podcast.
Perfect. That's beautiful.
I didn't know what else to do there.
Everybody, good night. That's it for us.
Yeah, right.
Welcome in everybody to another episode of Totem Talks. We're in season 6.5, episode 2.
That's right.
We're here. We're ready to go, and we are enjoying the time we got for this.
I think so.
After a rambunctious episode last week, we come back with our mid-season review of Guitar Players.
That's right.
And I again sticking to the theme, Nick, since you put
Sure,
together this little half season of just two of the most different people you could
sure.
have to compare and contrast.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
totally fair.
welcome in everybody where you're listening.
Wherever I am.
I'm Pat, and we are Totem Talks. And if you're like, what the hell's Totem Talks? I don't know how you found us. Second of
Thank you.
all, thank you for finding us. Third of all, we're a music podcast who is working tirelessly around the clock to piece together all of the information to determine the greatest musical artists of all time.
That's right.
And that's it. No more, no less. That is
Just
our
that
mission
very
here at
specifically,
Totem Talks.
extremely narrow.
It's extremely narrow. We're looking for goats.
That's right.
We're looking for musical goats.
Billy's oh, right.
And the question is, did we find them today? So, Nick, I know it's
Mhm.
quick. We're
Yeah,
blazing speed here.
we're blazing.
Why don't you let us know who we're covering today?
Of course. So on this, guitar-centric matchup, we are pitting Dick Dale against Eric Gales.
Yep, the old
Mostly for
tale
the
of
sound of that.
Gales versus Dales.
Z.
it is
The
a
S
it's a
at the
real
end of Dales
doozy.
is for surf.
Exactly, for surf, of course, as it should be with
What
Dick
else would
Dale.
it be?
And I guess listen, there's really nothing else for it. You know who we are, you know what we're doing here. I guess you should know a little bit more about Dick Dale. So Dick Dale, born Richard Anthony Mansour, was an American rock guitarist and pioneer of surf music who was active from 1955 until he passed away in 2019. We covered three albums as usual. We started with Surfer's Choice from 1962, followed that up with King of the Surf Guitar from 1963, and then we closed things out with Calling Up Spirits from 1996.
Yes,
And Nick, you had the pleasure of doing the research on Dick Dale this
I
week.
did. So I will
So
go
why don't
first.
you go ahead and get us started here with
Sure.
Surfer's Choice?
Okay, so obviously I know who Dick Dale is, and I always have, and I mean everyone knows Miserlou. Um, but I had never listened to this record before. So going in, I didn't really have any other expectations other than general like surf rock.
Sure.
And the first thing I noticed was the recording quality was not very good.
No,
Um,
no.
but that was kind of a double-edged sword because as whatever that took away from the record, what I felt like it gave back was this record felt like a concert experience. It felt like being in the concert hall listening to this band doing a set. It didn't feel as much like a straight studio album as a lot of other stuff around this time. And then after I listened to it, I was reading the wiki page, and the album was mostly recorded live at the Rendezvous Ballroom with a few overdubs added in the studio. I'm like, okay, well, it makes sense. That's probably why it was so difficult to get a good sound, but it does have the energy of a live performance, and I do think that is a positive, like, in helping you feel like you're there in the moment. Um,
Sure.
good, yeah, and Miserlou is on here as, Miserlou Twist. It's obviously, like, a legendary guitar piece. You can't it's a classic, it's an instrumental classic, generally speaking, um, and the picking speed that this guy has, like, his picking speed is second to none. I get cramps all up and down my arm just listening to some of these tracks, which it's really cool for him. Shake and Stomp I thought was another really cool instrumental. Um, strangely enough, we started listening to the song Lovey Dovey, and I'm like, "Oh, the Joker." Um, like,
Sure.
the lyrics from Lovey Dovey, I guess, were used. I didn't even know that the lyrics in The Joker by Steve Miller Band were referential to another song. But now I know, I've learned that. Um, here's my takeaway. There are 12 tracks, 6 original, 6 covers. The 6 covers were fine. The 6 originals were the most interesting. A lot of them were instrumental. They were the coolest. They had the most interesting parts to listen to. And so I think that is a positive when we listen to an artist and their original music, just holds more interest than their covers.
I completely agree with you about that part of it for sure. The covers were lackluster in comparison to the originals, which is typically a positive, although it does suck that it's a 50-50 split,
Mhm,
especially since like it's a 50-50 split with such an interesting style because
mhm.
Dick Dale was doing it, you know, right before the Beach Boys really started
Correct.
doing it.
Yeah.
So the surf rock movement really started here.
Mhm.
And it almost feels like the studio, maybe not Dick Dale himself, was just like only dipping a toe in.
Sure.
And like
Mhm.
that's a little unfortunate.
Yeah.
The album itself, I mean, is fine. Here's what I'll say, because I'm very glad that I didn't just blindly follow my albums that I was given.
Okay.
Because the first album, Surfer's Choice, the only available version of it, as I found out, was the 2006 re-release,
Okay.
which includes the original track listing, not in the original
Mhm.
order,
Okay.
and also like another like two versions of Miserloo.
Gotcha.
And then the second one, King of the Surf Guitar, is also the name of one of his greatest hits albums,
Yes,
which
that
opens with, you guessed it, Miserloo. So I'm
yeah,
like,
that was a little tricky.
right. So my first like three quarters of my notes that I gave
Mhm.
were like, I can't I can like condone the fact that I've listened to this song three times in the first 11 tracks
Right.
of his music. So then I was like, wait a minute, let me go back. Like when you're in the
Mhm.
60s, things get wonky.
Yeah.
And so I did figure out that that
Yeah.
was not his fault.
I started
Uh
making that mistake too before I was like, "Hold on, I'm finding like 6 different versions of this that are not
yeah.
the track listing that I'm seeing online." So but I was able to find the right ones.
Yeah, I just ended up piecing together the second album cuz
Okay.
I was not having luck with that,
It
and
was
nor
fully
was I.
available on Apple Music for the record.
Yeah, but that requires me listening to things through my iPad, which is not gonna happen. That's just not happening. I
Fair enough.
mean, I'm a Google, Amazon person or YouTube, if nothing else. And YouTube came through at the end. All that to say, listening to Dick Dale is a true experience because surf music is repetitive as hell. I'll be honest.
Okay, sure.
I'll be honest. It is. It's a super interesting concept.
Mhm.
And I think that Dick Dale is so important to have been like the influence.
Sure.
And like when you hear the people who like Dick Dale directly
Oh,
influence you
yeah.
cite him, it makes perfect sense. Like people like Van Halen, who
Mhm.
is well known for taking that really fast finger pick style that
Mhm.
Dick Dale is showcasing here and putting it in the rock space, not the
Yep.
surf rock space. Or somebody like Brian May, who is like taking these similar chords and movements and putting them into, again, more of like a rock space, but less of a hard rock space. But at its core, the reason like it's like you have one block and you're trying to build a tower with one block to me. And that's not Dick Dale's fault. Like he created this block out of nothing.
Mhm.
And what I really loved in this album is more so than in like the surf rocks as you get further on, like the Trashmen
Sure.
and the Beach Boys.
The Surfaris.
Yeah, as far as you're really getting the like Middle Eastern influence
Yes, definitely.
that surf rock really comes from. It
Mhm.
comes from taking those like chord progressions and chords and things that you would hear like in almost like a sitar space
Mhm.
and just playing them slightly tweaked in the rock space with guitars. And it
Right.
creates this like surfing feel.
Mhm.
And Dick Dale does it extremely well. it's just a product where it's like we could appreciate it, I think, as like music people,
Yeah.
people in the space, but it definitely feels like it's missing something
Hmm.
that would like propel it into modern day spaces.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh,
It
not a
sounds just
knock.
like summer now.
Sure,
It's
sure.
hard in the modern context to hear this outside of summer. Like June and July and the first half of August feels like where this music
Yeah,
peaks.
I totally get that. I mean, I'll take us into King of the Surf Guitar,
That
and
wasn't King of the Surf Guitar that you were talking about?
I was talking about Surfer's Choice. I mean, it's really it's
Oh,
the
because
the
you went on a long diatribe about how much of a hard time you had finding King of the Surf Guitar, so I assumed everything you said after was in reference to the album.
Oh yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It all kind of is because my main notes for this album is it's 30 minutes of the same thing. I mean, it's 1 year later. Technically,
Right.
not much has changed. He's still going about his thing. He's still doing it. He's still creating. It's still a mix of covers and originals. I think actually this one
It's way
is
more covers this
more
time.
covers than originals, which is a little
Yeah.
upsetting. Although the surf rock version of Hava Nagila was bold.
It was
Was
super bold.
was a
I love it.
bold choice. And the surf rock version of What I'd Say by Ray Charles, also a bold choice.
But it made more sense for the kind of band that I think that they were.
Sure. Again, I'm not knocking it. It's definitely decisions where I saw them and was confused, but I wasn't like, this sucks. Like it was
Yeah.
good. It was
Mhm.
just interesting all the way through. But yeah, the huge amount of covers on this album is disappointing, especially since
Right.
again, I would say the Dick Dale Stomp was a great one and Break
Yep.
Time.
Yep.
His two
Yep.
originals that I heard on
They
here
were the best.
were the best two
Yep.
songs.
100%.
So that's really unfortunate is the covers are just not quite as good.
Yeah. No, I fully
Also,
agree.
I guess here's where I'll say before I kick it back
Sure.
to you, there's just no singing.
There's not a lot.
There's barely any, and Dick Dale is the one doing the singing, which I'll give him
Mhm.
credit for, but he's not that good of a singer. I mean, he's all
But he's
right.
not bad.
He's not bad. He's
He's
not.
just serviceable.
Yeah, sure. He's like it's like
Mhm.
almost like in my mind, it feels like he played through this whole album, and then somebody was like, "Dick, there needs to be some words at some point." And he's like, all right, run it back. And then just like every once in a while, we'll sing something.
Sure.
That's like kind of what it feels like.
Sure.
So that's what I got for King of the Surf Guitar.
Okay. I will try not to say any of the things you already said. My positive for this is that it again had the energy of a live show. What I got from this was if I was alive in 1962 or 1963, going out to the Rendezvous Club and seeing Dick Dale and his Deltones would have been a great night. We would have
Oh,
had so
100%.
much like, it would have been awesome to be a part of this experience while
Sure.
they were playing. But, like I mentioned before, a lot of it now feels a little relegated to, like, a summer playlist. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I would have like, I passively enjoyed this album enough that I would re-listen to it again a million times, but I would never really think to put it on again unless I was, like, out in the pool, kinda relaxing in the
Sure.
sun, and in
That
that
makes
case, it would
sense.
feel right on. Like, I'm probably not gonna jump back on it midwinter or in this fall or anything like that, but I enjoyed the experience of the record while still being kind of disappointed, um, that there were way less originals, and the music definitely feels niche.
I think a good moment here, because I know you're about to pull us into the
Mhm.
90s, which we'll talk about. I can't wait. Uh what I learned through these first two albums is that Dick Dale is more than Miserloo, which
Definitely.
really I think we only really associate him with. I feel like that wasn't his big
Sure.
hit, and I feel like it kind of became his big hit because of one of your favorite movies of all time, Pulp Fiction.
Correct. Yes.
And I think that kind of like the resurgence here, which
That
we're
is
about to get into his resurgence,
yes.
and I feel like the rest of the work is just as strong.
Mhm.
The reason I wanted to cut you off before you got into here is we got a candidate for best name, and we didn't get to talk
Oh.
about it.
Oh
One of
my
the
goodness.
producers on this album, on King of the Surf Guitars, name is Voyle Gilmore, and I just
Voil.
love Voyle. I'm into it. I'm into Voyle.
Voil. All right. That's a good one,
I'm,
I guess.
I'm into Voyle Gilmore. It's a weird
Oh,
name. It's
shit. You know what I'm just seeing right now, and I didn't notice
oh
it before? You know who played the piano on this record?
who oh
Leon
Leon
Russell.
Russell. Yeah.
Leon Russell, our
I
guy.
I didn't want to say it because I don't know because there's a couple
Yeah,
places you can
no,
go with your 6
it
degrees.
wasn't there. I didn't even realize that Leon played on this record. Just goes to
Gotcha.
show you, like, how many records that guy played on.
Oh, for sure. When
Yeah.
like doing the research into Leon Russell when we did, that man is
Mhm.
everywhere.
Everywhere. Okay, so calling up spirits. So first of all, what's interesting is it's 1996 when this comes out. Way different than the early 60s. Although he had not been putting out music throughout the 70s or 80s at all for reasons I will get into later. This is an album dedicated to American Indians.
His
And
words, not ours.
correct. And this is an album that is still being labeled just as surf music, but I mean, it still recognizably is at times, but it is also a lot more now compared to his albums with the Deltones.
Yeah.
Um, you get some very interesting things, including the fact that he played trumpet on this album as well as guitar. um,
Fascinating.
yeah, more singing from him, and he is again serviceable. He gets it done. But you hear not just surf rock, but like a little bit more mainstream classic rock influences. You hear folk influences at times. You can even hear the influence that metal might have had on his guitar playing, like at different points throughout this record. Um, I think it's very interesting that he was able to kind of take in all of those different things over the decades and still be very recognizably Dick Dale as a guitarist. Like
Yeah.
you could put this album on having no idea, and if you were at all familiar with any of his early work, you'd be like, "Oh, that's him." Um, and I mean, his chops are certainly still fantastic. I still don't even really understand how. Like, this is the second straight week where my guitarist has had a right hand in some way that I don't understand it. For Corey Long, it was his right wrist,
Yeah.
and for Dick Dale, it's just his right hand with the way he was able to pick. A couple of his old tunes made its way onto this one. Um, and even a Hendrix cover. I think he does a good job with everything. This was a good, solid rock record. It was nice to see him do something totally different and maintain a voice. So I think that's what we can kind of hope for our artists as they age.
Okay. I agree with a lot of what you said, and I will make it a point to end on a positive note. But I got some things to say first. Thing number one, my brother Dick Dale. You dedicated this to your words, the American Indians. Jesus Christ, that album cover
It's not
is
great.
so bad.
It's not great
It's a painting of him like as a mountain, maybe? Is he I don't
I don't.
like
I think
but
so.
it screams like old time prairie, and then there's like
Yes.
kids playing in the corner, and like one of them is like looks Native American, and
Hmm.
it's cringy as all hell.
I think it was well intentioned, but like
I
as the
agree.
years have gone on, it
I'm
has
not
not
saying
aged
yeah.
well.
When I say cringy, I mean truly cringy.
Yeah,
A
for
lot of
sure.
cringe comes with the best of intentions,
Of
and
course.
this is that.
Yes.
Uh the
Yeah.
other thing that was just so cringy, and I know that there's a personal connection here. I know that.
Mhm.
But I'm gonna see if I can recreate this. Hey Jimmy, I'm still here. Wish you were too. Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, my guy.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that was necessary. Just play the song.
It was so I was laughing so hard because like I get it. I understand Jimi Hendrix was, someone you knew or respected. I'm not sure of your relationship.
Jimmy definitely
Oh my
cited him
God.
as an influence.
Yeah, yeah. But again, I don't know if there was a connection on either side of you know what I mean?
Sure.
I don't know. But I do know, even if he's your best friend, like say Nick tomorrow, you tragically pass away.
We can only
And
hope.
40 years from now, I'm putting out an album and I'm covering like right in front of me.
Sure.
Something that's like a
If you were to
you
say that out loud before the record, I would come back from the dead to kill you.
right. Like it's so
Mhm.
Nick, I'm still here. Wish you were too. It was so
Uh,
cringy.
yeah, it was terrible.
All of the cringe out of the way. Dude still absolutely got the chops. And one thing that I thought was interesting because I had this written down and you kind of touched on it. It almost feels like when you talked about the metal space where he's
Yeah,
coming from, it almost feels like Dick Dale is being influenced by Van Halen, who was directly influenced by him.
sure. I was almost
That's the
thinking sort of
vibe that it
like
felt.
it almost felt like at times, not all the way through, like a Steve Vai record.
Sure, that's a good point as well. I think that the only thing that I had issue with here is all it almost felt like the reverse of old school Dick Dale.
Mhm.
Whereas in the old school stuff, the originals were like far and away the best tracks on the album, and the covers felt very lackluster. I think Fever and Third Stone from the Sun were the two strongest tracks on here.
Mm. Okay, yeah,
And I
fair.
think the other stuff was good, but it didn't quite feel as complete as the
Sure,
covers. And, it's a small comparison, it's a small discrepancy here, but it definitely was noticeable to me. Uh once I calmed down
sure.
from the album cover and
Yeah.
issues therein. And
It's
then,
it's very funny that that was the one issue that you had with the 3rd album because we're going to have a very, very, very similar thing happen again in a little while.
yeah, there's a good chance.
But anyway,
But that's really all I got. I mean, Dick
yeah.
Dale was an artist for me who is super important for being one of the building blocks of music. Like people
Mhm.
stood on his shoulders
For sure.
for sure, but he definitely like backs it up with an extremely niche technical prowess
Yes.
that maybe doesn't get quite recognized by the more layman people who are
Sure.
listening. Like
Yeah.
that style of finger picking, like I can tell, like when finger picking is part of
Well, he
the
uses a pick
slit.
generally, but
Oh
it's the
yeah, I'm
way
sorry. When
the
like that
style
the
he picks with
style of like the like that really fast
is called
rhythmic.
tremolo picking is what it's called.
Okay, that's a good, yeah, tremolo picking. Like that is a very technically difficult
Mhm.
style that, oh, like it doesn't get quite the recognition as like shredding would.
Sure,
Even though
but
it's probably more technically difficult than just like,
it's definitely very influential on shredders too. Tremolo picking
yeah,
is very popular in the metal sphere.
for sure. But that's really all I
Yeah,
got. So why don't you give us some Dick
sure.
Dale
So
facts?
I would love to. I'm gonna start with what was unique about him, and obviously, like, his whole style was unique. So, as a backup, in case I couldn't find anything, just the very style of surf rock that he invented, combining the tremolo picking with, a lot of reverb, which was pretty innovative at the time, as well as, um, scales from Eastern music. All of that isn't, unique. But what I thought was really interesting when I found it out, so you know how like a lot of left-handed guitarists will buy a right-handed guitar and then string it upside down,
Yeah.
like Hendrix. And so he started with a right-handed guitar, and instead of restringing it, he just played it upside down, and he just learned guitar fully upside down. And
Yeah.
then later, when he was able to get a left-handed guitar, he strung it upside down so he could continue to play the guitar upside down. So Dick Dale plays guitar
Good.
upside down, is what I found out.
Very interesting.
Very interesting indeed. And so I will move on to his 6 degrees. And that is the fact that in 1996, the same year that this album came out, actually sort of in support of this album, he played at Warped Tour. It was the second time ever that Warped Tour had ever been. And also playing in that year's lineup were several bands that we've covered, some better than others. Blink 182, Limp Bizkit, and Real Big Fish were all in the lineup
Such a
that year.
fascinating thing because when I think of Warped Tour,
Hmm.
I think of like bands in the Blink 182 sphere.
Sure.
And Dick Dale is like not in that sphere.
But you know what? Here's what I think it is, and I could be totally off in saying this. When I think of music associated with skate culture, I can see them
I
both
get
being the
that.
same thing. Like,
Sure.
because a lot of surf rock is also, especially Dick Dale's work, is considered like proto punk in some ways.
Well, were you not at Warped Tour 96?
I was not. I was 4.
And that stopped you, I guess, from
Uh, uh,
going?
w-
I was there.
only,
I mean, I was
only the
also for.
only because of the funds. I didn't have the funds. I had insufficient
That's
funds.
you know what? That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
Ford's hard to get
I
hard to
wasn't
get
working a
money for
lot.
tickets. That's
Yeah.
fine.
All right, his highlight. I had a few things to choose from. One of which being his first Grammy nomination, which actually came in the late '80s when he played on the track "Pipeline" with Stevie Ray Vaughan, which is very cool to have those two together.
That is pretty awesome.
But the one that I chose was Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction was the highlight of his career. Uh,
100%.
the use of Miser Lou, it kind of renewed interest in him and his music. And he hadn't put out any records since like 64 or 65 with the Deltones. And then there was so much renewed interest that he started putting out records again and doing world tours off the
Yeah.
back of the
And I'll say, like,
popularity of that.
seriously, didn't didn't miss a beat. I mean, I know
Yeah, yeah.
there's stuff to make fun of on that last album for sure, but like in terms of his like technical ability,
Oh my
did
god.
not miss a beat. He still
Yeah,
absolutely had it.
right. And he had been touring again, I think, in the '80s for a time, but not as extensively. And he wasn't writing new music with that.
Sure.
But he did start again then. And that kind of brings us into the low light. I mean, one, you could say that the whole genre that he invented was very short lived.
Yeah.
It started to gain popularity and then ran right into the Stonewall of the British invasion. Like if you're sort of on the ascent and then the Beatles come to town, sorry, buddy, uh, it's not going to work out for you. Um,
That's true.
yeah, it is. Historically, that's clearly the case. Um, but the other issue was around that time he became very ill. He had colorectal cancer,
Oh no.
and was forced to retire for his health issues. Very unfortunately, but he was able to fully recover. Even when it came back in, I think, the 2010s, he was fine. It wasn't until um, some other health issues that he did finally pass away. But that brings us to the last low light, which is actually he toured up until his death and had tour dates scheduled after he passed, and the reason why he was still touring was to pay for his medical bills.
Medical debt is the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States.
That's correct. If
I can
only
tell
there
you
was
that.
something that could be done about that.
That is, I mean, that's unfortunate. I mean, here's what I'll
Yeah.
say. It is, it's good that he was able to share his art for so many years of his
Yes.
life
Mhm.
because he clearly was extremely talented
Mhm.
and very influential to the instrument and to music in general.
Right.
But
Everyone
it's,
deserves to be able to retire.
yeah, I mean, seriously, like, we often joke, like, you and I and a lot of people in our age sphere
Mhm.
often joke about like we're going to work until we die. There is no
Yes.
retirement is death for us
Mhm.
basically. And it sucks when you see that that's the case for poor
For a
Mr.
lot of
Dale.
people, yeah.
Well, yeah, for a lot of people, very true.
Yeah.
But for Dick Dale
Yeah.
in our example,
All right, and on to the meanest slash nicest thing. I went with just nicest because that's all I really found. Um, he did become involved in our environmental activism in the 80s, because again he like went swimming, and ended up with like some sort of horrible infection because of contaminated water. And so through that he began learning about like environmental contamination and became much more of an activist. Um,
that's crazy. I mean, the
it is
rotten
that a
luck.
I
Because
know.
here's one thing I did know about Dick Dale, which I thought you might mention. I
Mhm.
know Dick Dale was a teetotaler,
Yes. Mhm.
so I knew that. So
Mhm.
I knew he was like very health conscious.
Yep.
So like, my God, poor
Terrible luck.
guy.
Terrible luck.
Terrible luck for somebody who like
Which
never
goes
did
to
drugs or
show, I mean,
alcohol,
drink and do
stopped eating
drugs,
red meat. I
everyone.
know at some point,
Mhm.
like
Yep.
did all those, and they still just shitty luck for him. I'm
Terrible luck.
sorry.
I know. I know. But he still lived a good long life.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's played benefit festivals for natural disaster relief. Notably, in 2009, there was one in Australia called One Great Night on Earth, which helped with a lot of bushfires and things like that. So he was involved in that kind of charity playing, and that's that. That's Dick Dale. Goodbye.
Well, congratulations to Mr. Dale for being a pleasant listen. And
Yes.
I think we're going to go from Mr. Dale. We're going to take a short break, which you won't hear, listeners. And we're going to go right into Eric Gales.
All right.
Good old Eric.
I'm sure you had a very tough time.
Uh, Not as much as you'd think,
Oh, good.
honestly. Like I really was expecting it to be more than it was. There was one of the list that I just couldn't find
Sure.
anything for at all, but the rest of it came pretty
All right.
quickly.
Nice. Yeah, because I feel like he's just one of those guys where have you ever heard of him? If you play guitar, absolutely. If you don't, huh?
For sure. The only reason I knew who he was, it was because I saw a video of him playing with Joe Bonamassa.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So I knew who he was, but not any of his songs.
Sure. No, I didn't really know his original stuff. Like I learned about him through YouTube and seeing him doing like covers of like playing
Yeah,
Kashmir and things like that.
sure, that makes sense. All right. I like how I'm like, oh, let me pull up the albums. Like there's pages for the albums.
Mm-mm.
There's not. There's not. There's nothing. I've got. I've got
You can have
nothing.
one page.
Yeah. All right. Let me take a sip of water before we go. Got to stay hydrated.
Absolutely.
I do find it interesting that, like, in multiple places, as he's also known as Raw Dog.
I
I
think
never saw that anywhere.
no, I oh no, that's not what it is. I was thinking that maybe it was his name when he like like did rap verses for 3 6 Mafia.
Maybe,
I
but
thought that might be it, but it says that he went by Lil E on this. So I don't know.
I don't know. I got no idea.
No idea.
All right. I guess
3, 2, 1.
Eric Gales is an American blues rock guitarist.
God damn it, what's his middle
Uh,
name? I'm so used to that cadence.
I know. Trust me,
It's
it's
very
not
upsetting.
there. I wish it was. Also known as Raw Dog. Can't tell you
By who?
where.
By who?
I don't know. I don't know, but it's on the page that somebody called him Raw Dog once.
Okay.
He's been active since 1990 to the present day. He was one of those musicians that was considered a child prodigy.
Yeah.
And we covered 3 albums from Mr. Gales. We started with Eric Gales, the Eric Gales Band from 1991. We followed that up with Transformation from 2011. And then we closed it out with Crown from 2022. And this is my artist. And I'm going to tell you right now, formula was not a huge factor in picking the second album.
Sure. Yeah.
There is no information about sales.
Nope.
It was tough sledding to find that. So basically, I had 2 choices here. I was talking to Nick about it, and the choices were we want to pick like the middle. And so I was looking and I was like, the middle, like time wise, or the middle
Album-wise.
album wise.
Yeah.
I went with the middle time wise to get to 2011.
Sure.
I feel like that was, or no, I'm sorry. I think I went with the middle album wise. I think time wise would have got me to like 2006, which he did have an album in. Yeah. So I was torn between, I think it was Crystal Vision or Transformation. And so what I did was I typed in Eric Gales in my search engine for my music streaming service, which is not a sponsor to this video. So you are audio, so you'll hear nothing. And whichever one of those came up first was the one I picked. It was Transformation. I went, well, it came up first in my SEO. So that it wins. Yeah. But I'll take us into the Eric Gales Band. And here's what I'll tell you. Clearly a ton of talent.
Oh, yeah.
Right off the bat. This is somebody who, it's interesting because I think when we just covered Dick Dale, you're hearing like influential building blocks, a lot of technical proficiency.
Yeah.
But then there's some repetitiveness. Just based on the nature of the genre. This feels like somebody who doesn't have hands and instead is just has a guitar for hands.
Right.
And is just making it speak to me.
Sure.
It like it was very emotive. He is also singing and rapping on these tracks.
Yeah.
And whereas Dick Dale's a passable singer, I would say Eric Gales is a good singer.
He's good.
Like, he's not somebody who can get away with just being a singer, I don't think.
Right.
But couple like a good voice with
really
the level
guitar
of
playing, yeah.
the level of guitar playing I'm getting, it was very interesting. Now, he's primarily in that blues R&B space, especially in this first album. And I think that he lives in it really well. The one thing I'll say about this album versus the other albums that we're going to come up with is this one is a little dated in the 90s R&B space.
Okay.
It's not a terrible thing. It's not like a huge negative. It's like, I think Transformation, when we get there, has like some of those like qualities of being almost timeless.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of the music, where it could be really anywhere and it could fit its spot. I think this album slots perfectly into the early 90s R&B space. I'm sure a lot of it is. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of it is because it definitely feels like the music is authentic and some of the extracurriculars of it makes it kind of be dated.
Right.
However, a huge positive for me in terms of listening was just the variation track by track. Especially coming off of Dick Dale, who, again, I think we spoke very highly of. But the sheer difference of having like pure surf rock and then like some differences in that third album versus like gearing more towards the blues, more towards pure R&B, mixes of the two with some other influences pulled in. like this is definitely somebody who, and I learned after listening, he gets compared to Hendrix a lot. And I
Yeah.
get it. I get it. I get it in terms of his expression. Maybe not in the chords he's playing, but in the way he expresses himself on the guitar. I definitely get that vibe.
Okay, so I have like it's interesting. I enjoyed this record. I took away from it so many different things than what you did, I guess. Because what struck me the most about this record is how heavy it was. Like
Sure.
we're saying blues, but it is heavy, heavy blues. It is, like we're verging on like Van Halen heavy.
I
Uh
get that. I
in
definitely
like
get that.
yeah, it's a really heavy record, but it's good. And actually I do hear a little Hendrix, but I actually hear a little Hendrix in his voice. And I don't know
Maybe
how
that's where a
intentional
lot of
that
the
was.
comparison comes from for me.
Because I hear of that in his voice. And I mean, what's crazy that I was realizing as I was listening is he was 17 when this record came out.
Which I found
What?
out afterwards. I could not believe it
That's
because
remarkable.
you say child prodigy, and so I
Yeah,
knew he
huh?
was going to be incredible on guitar. He does not sound like a 17-year-old, like
Nope.
vocally. He
Yeah,
sounds
none.
so much older than that.
Right. Yeah, he does. But what here's the guy, and this will be my last comment because you mostly said everything that was good about it. The influence that I heard in the guitar playing, especially because, like I said, I think it's blues, but it veers almost into the metal sphere at times with some of the influence. Vernon Reed from Living Color.
Okay, I get
Um,
that.
I definitely heard some of him in Gales' playing. And then we move on. Then we move
Yeah, no, I get
far
that.
into the future and do transformation.
Transformation.
So, I mean, this record was everything that I would expect from Eric Gales coming in. Really great riffs, excellent solos, very solid vocals. Again, I think this is a record that's on the heavier. It's maybe not as heavy as the first one, but it's pretty heavy a lot of the time. He's not playing easy blues. And that's why when you get into sometimes wrong feels right and he goes into a slow like an 8-minute slow blues all of a sudden. It's like, "Oh yeah, like this is exactly what I needed to hear from you on this record. Like exactly what I wanted." So it was nice to see that his heavy blues rock, which I think is leaning even heavier on the rock in this album too, a lot of the time, can slow down and it just shows he's a really great writer for his instrument as well as a player on it. I think in this record, all the different guitar parts, not just his ability to play solos, really shine through. And just to give a little credit to the band, "Sea of Bad Blood" had a killer bass solo in it, and was also, I think, one of the better songs
Yes.
on the record.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that is Steve Evans
Mhm.
playing the bass on that one.
Kudos.
Yes. And listen, here's what I'll say. Uh, After listening to this album, I was so glad I picked it because it really felt to me like somebody who's been playing for 20 years and knows the absolute ins and outs of what he wants to make happen.
Hmm.
Like it feels like somebody perfectly in sync with what they choose to put out. And
Sure.
that is all I can ever ask of an artist. It has the variations that we're talking about, the heavier sound that you're talking about, which I totally get. You lose a bit of that like dated feel of the when it gets in the R&B space.
Hmm.
It doesn't feel 90s. It feels more like rockish and heavy in a good
Yeah.
way. His voice really shines through. His voice on this album is, I know we said he's a good singer
Hmm.
and it still shines through, but there's definitely like more emotive qualities in his vocals now,
Sure.
which I
Oh,
really
he's no
appreciate.
longer a bully.
Yes, this is somebody who lived,
Yeah.
and like I appreciate the hell out of that. I really enjoyed the Sometimes Wrong Feels Right. I know you mentioned it. I'm
Yeah.
going to
That was
mention it
so good.
again.
I think it was the best
It
track.
was I really think so too. it was so like so evocative in the sound
I
of
was
like
afraid to say it
it's
because it was the longest track on the album.
but it's true. It's a good point. You are basic for thinking it, but
Right.
it's a good point because it is like a curveball from where the rest of the album is taking you,
Mhm.
and it just feels like, hey, I'm gonna try something different. Come along,
Yeah.
and it just is so on point the whole way through. The like slow feel of it, but like when I say slow, it never drags,
Yeah.
which is
Oh, not at
very
all.
important. And then for an 8-minute song, the one thing I have a problem with long songs, which I have been very vocal about in my time on the podcast, it has always been repetitiveness.
Mhm.
I hate 8-minute songs where it's like a 4-minute song twice. Why?
Like American Pie by Don McLean, where it's like
American
a
Pie
45-second song 8 times.
American Pie is a song where if the lyrics and the message weren't so good, I would hate it.
Fair enough.
And to be fair, that's a song that the last 20 times I've heard it, I've been the one singing it, and it's been because it got requested.
Yes, that's true.
Actually, maybe not the last 20 times because we did
But
Don
close.
McLean on the podcast. So
Sure.
one time was listening to it. But it's not a song that I seek out to listen to for that
Nope.
reason.
Mhm.
It gets repetitive as hell. This song does not do that. And I think this whole album is a testament to somebody who is not in the musical mainstream, but is probably significantly more talented than most of the current artists in the musical mainstream.
Y obviously.
Jesus Christ.
Obviously.
So I'll take us into Crown. And I will be fair because I said it about Dick Dale. It opens with a very, very cheesy uh
Spoken word
vocal
intro,
line,
yeah.
spoken word intro, where he's basically talking to his younger self.
Mhm.
And it's like it's a similar thing where it's like one sentence and it's like, oh, it's so cringy.
Don't need it.
You don't need it, especially
Especially
since you
that
know what.
message is covered in the lyrics really well later on in the
Yeah,
album.
I was about to say, you know why you don't need it? Because the lyrics perfectly sum up that message and do
Uh-huh.
it very well.
Exactly.
Like, take away that corny ass intro, and my God, this album shocked me with the lyrics.
It was the best album of the week, I think.
It was the best album of the week. I'm I'm telling you right now, in terms of a complete album, I don't know if we're going to get a better album in this season
Sure. Yeah, that's
because
totally
you
fair.
have excellent guitar playing, which is the whole point of the season. You have excellent songwriting with variants with the blues and the rock and the R&B and bringing in other artists, including the wonderful Joe Bonamassa, which I
Yep.
talked about a
Mhm.
little earlier, and more besides, which we'll talk about. And then the lyrics are so personal, but relatable.
Mhm.
Like they're very clearly talking about his own personal struggles growing up and his life and the pressures that he had as a child prodigy moving into the space, dealing with like addictions, dealing with recovering from that, dealing with all of those hardships. Um and it's interesting that he has a song I Want My Crown with Joe Bonamassa because a lot of him growing up, those two were the two child phenom guitar
Sure,
players.
yeah.
Like they were like not necessarily competition,
Right, but
but
they were being discussed very similarly.
right, they were being discussed in those same circles. And then Joe Bonamassa kind of soared when Eric Ailes faltered for reasons, which we'll get to. And it's great that they came together and did this. And, just really like all the way through. So far, I have listened to 12 albums in this half season.
Yes.
And I think there's a collection of albums that I would recommend to my musician friends and my music friends and people that I know would like a certain song here
Mhm.
and there, this is the album I would recommend to everyone.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fair. Yeah, I mean, it starts with the worst part of the album is the spoken word intro at the beginning.
Absolutely, it's so
It is,
bad.
it's so bad, and then it is fantastic. What I really
Absolutely.
like the first 2 albums, my main takeaway is like, "Well, wow, he's really heavy a lot of the time." Like, this guy really plays heavy. He's lightened up his sound a lot here. Not that he can't go back to the heavy every once in a while with certain songs, but overall, you get more like, you get an acoustic guitar, you get a lot of less distorted songs. And here's the thing, that really shows how good his chops are, because if it's not overly distorted, the closer to clean your tone is, the closer to damn good you better be if you want it to sound good on the record or live or
Yeah.
anywhere. And honestly, his chops are as great, if not better, than ever. Um, I really like the general way that his music kind of mellows with his age. The writing is really, really strong. I think you get great tone throughout this record. Now that he's like trying to do thing a little bit more of a lighter feel, he finds great tones, especially on "Too Close to the Fire" would be my, like, if you want to hear how good his guitar can sound. "Stand Up" might have been the best song on the album. And then I believe his wife, LaDonna, comes on and
Yeah.
sings lead and a couple backing parts. So she has a great voice. Like, she sounds
She's incredible.
fantastic. Yeah. Um,
She's incredible considering they didn't meet through mutual music.
oh, interesting.
Like,
Just
I
so
thought they
happened to
must.
be. Right.
Yeah, like, crazy to me.
Yeah, she was brilliant on this record as well. It was an excellent record from beginning to end.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
listen, I think it's time for some Eric Gale's facts. And here's what I'll tell you. I know I was expecting it to be a lot harder to find facts about him based on
Mhm.
the lesser information about his albums.
Yes.
But here's what I'll tell you. Interestingly enough, his unique fact, kind of similar to Dick Dale's.
Okay.
He plays a right-handed guitar upside down,
Right, strung the other
uh,
way.
strung the other way, but he is not left-handed.
Fascinating.
He's not a naturally left-handed person. He was taught by his brother who is left-handed and just never second guessed or looked back on it, and then just kind of learned to play that way.
Okay.
And so that's a unique thing is like normally it's a left-handed person like desperately trying to play the guitar in a comfortable way. And for for Gales, it was very much like, no, I just got taught this way and thought that's the way it
Yeah,
was,
that's super interesting. As a left-handed
which
person who
makes you
plays right-handed
question.
guitar,
Yeah,
it
which
just makes
makes
so much
you.
more sense to me.
I wonder, would he be better or worse if he'd been learning directly from his dominant hand?
Who knows?
Like,
I mean,
is part of the
at
magic of
this
Eric
point,
Gales
yeah,
the the
that's
fact
that's
that he learned
interesting.
this way. Like,
Yeah.
it's curious.
I mean, to me, at this point in my life, the fact that I have my dominant hand moving up and down the fretboard for me is
Yeah,
preferable. I
sure.
would not wanna be picking with my dominant hand when I feel like I do most of the work with my dominant hand, so
I get that. I
I
get that.
like playing it the wrong way.
I have a question for you,
Go
Nick.
ahead.
This is purely. Did we ever cover the Fugees?
No.
No, we didn't. Okay. Did we ever cover anything Lauren Hill?
She may have collabed on a couple of songs that we've
Okay.
done with other artists. I
I
think that
could
she
have
has. I'm pretty sure she
sworn.
has.
I could have sworn we covered Lauren Hill at some point. I looked in our like evaluation
I am
spreadsheet and couldn't
sure that
find
she
her.
would have, like, the more I think about it, the more I'm sure she was featured on songs by certain artists
Okay.
that we've covered.
Okay, that makes sense because I was very confused. Because so I'll go to the highlight. I have a couple highlights that I want to talk about here
Mhm.
with Gales. So in 2017, he released Middle of the Road, which was his 15th studio album,
Okay.
which featured a numerous artists, including, and this is part of the 6 Degrees, Gary Clark Jr.
Nice.
Makes perfect sense in the
Yep.
sphere of who he would collab with. It also featured Lauryn Hill and others, but that's why I was curious. Like,
Okay.
do I include her? I'm not going to include her in the 6 Degrees then, because
Fair
I don't
enough.
need to.
No.
But the album was his first album to chart on the Billboard's Top Blues Album chart, which peaked at number 4.
That was the first one to
Yeah,
chart? That's
and
crazy.
yeah, which I would count as a highlight. Like he finally started charting on them.
Yeah.
And then his next album, The Bookends, topped the chart at number 1. So like right around 2017 is when he started peaking in those moments.
Yeah.
Follow that up with in 2019 he won Blues Rock Artist of the Year at the Blues Music Awards,
Makes sense.
and in 2020 he won his second consecutive Blues Music Award as Blues Rock Artist of the Year.
Yeah, okay.
So that chunk of time I would count as his highlight. All
Yeah,
he
that's
went from he finally broke into the charts, broke in at number 4.
yeah,
Like, he broke in at number 4 and then topped the charts and won back-to-back Blues Rock Artist of the Year.
sure.
So I would give him a lot of credit
I
on
would too.
that. So we'll move into his low light. And I kind of mentioned it a little bit. So for 27 years, Eric Gales was addicted to drugs. And the drugs that he has admitted to are marijuana, cocaine, and various pills. And he did say among others.
Mm.
This all culminated in 2009, where Eric kind of hit bottom and served jail time at the Shelby County Correctional Center for possession of drugs and a weapon. But in late 2015, early 2016, he got clean, never looked back. And in fact, in his speech for the first Blues Rock Artist of the Year, he mentioned that he was celebrating 3 years of sobriety.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
you know,
Good for him.
a low light that he did come out on the other side of.
Glad to hear it.
So I have nothing for meanest thing.
Good.
I looked very hard. I always look whenever there's like a gap. I always look very hard to see if I could fill the gap. No way. I couldn't find a single person speaking ill of him at all.
Right.
But I do have 2 nicest things.
Excellent.
So I have a kind of thing, the first one is kind of standard. The second one is kind of not standard. So the first one is what I call the nice that he has done, which means, our typical example of like the nicest moments. It's a philanthropic moment. So Eric Gales
Mhm.
and Devin Allman, they celebrated Albert King at a 2-night concert series and donated all proceeds of the concert to the National Blues Museum to support the music missions and education programs,
Okay, cool.
which is awesome. And then my second one is nice that was done for him
Okay.
because I thought this was really cool. So, fans and other like very prominent musicians, including like Joe Bonamassa and like that
Mhm.
level of music aficionado, started and shared a GoFundMe because Eric and his wife LaDonna were hospitalized with COVID, like a pretty serious
Mm.
case of COVID.
Yeah.
They were like both hospitalized for a little while. And in the posts, the various posts that I found sharing this GoFundMe, like there were multiple examples of different charitable, philanthropic, like avenues that Eric Gales had gone down before, and like constantly donating his time, effort, and money to various things, and like smashed the goal of
Nice.
raising money for his medical expenses with LaDonna and COVID. And all of the comments were just how wonderful they are as people. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing to share.
Sure.
And then 6 Degrees, I know I mentioned Gary Clark Jr. and him working with Gary Clark Jr. in Middle of the Road, but it is also pretty cool in 1994. So at 21 years old, he performed at Woodstock 94 with Carlos Santana.
Oh, cool.
So
Nice.
that was a pretty cool one.
Okay.
I thought that was worth mentioning.
Definitely.
And that is what I've
Okay.
got on Eric Gales.
Well, let's do some grading. So let me just put the rest of Dick Dale's resume out there before we give a grade, because he has quite a resume. Aside from being a founder of a
He does.
genre, he essentially is one of the people behind modern reverb technology because he was the one working on portable reverb effects, and getting those to be something that you could bring with you live and not just sound you get in studio. So he was pushing that technology. He was also working with Leo Fender on pushing amp technology. And he and Leo Fender together developed the Fever 100-watt amplifier, which is really interesting. Obviously, the
That is pretty
tremolo,
awesome.
yeah, the tremolo picking style is something that he really brought to, while not inventing it, he is the one who made it popular. He's in the Hollywood Rock Walk of Fame as of 1996. In 2000, he was elected to the Library of Congress Hall of Records for outstanding achievement in music. And in 2009, he was elected to the Musicians Hall of Fame. He has, of course, been cited as an influence by the Beach Boys, but also Jimi Hendrix, Brian May, Pete Townsend, Eddie Van Halen, um, all of these things
The Trash
that I
Men.
would, the Trashmen, obviously. All of these things that I think are significantly important to all music that happened after them.
I completely agree. This
Yeah.
is this is somebody who maybe isn't a household name, but who has contributed vastly to various different areas
Whether
of
yeah,
music and culture.
right. Whether or not you know who he is, the music that you listen to or enjoy has in some way been influenced by his, not either his music and his playing or his innovation technology.
Yeah. The pincer of cultural impact.
Yes. So I think he gets a
I
good score here, much
I
better than
think
you
he
would
gets a
think
good
just on
score.
like one like song alone that's in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. You count him as a one-hit wonder for Miserloo based on its
Mhm.
popularity and endurance.
Sure.
So then you have all of his accolades, Hall of Fames, this,
Mhm.
that, like bumps him up a little bit.
Sure.
And then you're adding in the influences and then the technological influences.
Right, and then the founding of a subgenre of music as well as a little
Right.
something.
Which is a little something here, it'll be a little something in X
Yeah.
Factor.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean,
I
is
th
a
I think it's
7?
think that would be entirely fair.
Yeah, like
I was gonna say it's gotta be above the average by a little bit.
I
I
think
think
a
a 7's
7
totally
makes
fine.
sense. I think if Dick Dale was more of a household name,
It could be even
you could
higher.
argue
Sure.
him in like the 8s or higher. I mean,
Yeah, I
he's
mean, the
contributed immensely.
reverb alone or amplification technology alone, I think, would be enough to really push his score. But the fact that he was so heavily involved in both is just pretty incredible.
Yeah, 100%. It's truly like to anybody who doesn't understand the ins and outs of guitar playing and like amplification at all. I'm trying to think of a it's like if he invented soup, or it's like if soup was a thing, right?
Sure,
And like this dude came in and invented like chicken broth.
sure, yeah, yeah,
Like soup
mhm,
existed before that, but
yeah.
he came in and was like, "What if we put this?" Which is now the basis for
All of the other
many,
soups,
many, many,
many
many
other soups.
soups.
Yes, right. No, you're right on. That's an excellent metaphor, honestly.
Thank you. I
Hmm.
I bet you were really
Yeah,
worried when I said soup.
very worried.
Yeah, I think a 7. Honestly, like I'm cool putting a 7.
Sure,
Let's mull it a little bit and see, because I honestly could even see it going up. Let's move
that's
on.
fine. We'll come back.
Let's
Look,
let's move on.
Eric Gales is going to have a tough time here.
Yeah, here's the unfortunate part. He's extremely talented. He flits around these
This
circles
is the only place
and
he'll have a tough time, to
yeah,
be clear.
very, very true. He is he definitely is somebody who influences and like has like ranges of like vast success in
Sure.
musical
If
circles.
you play guitar, you know who he is.
Yeah, and even if you don't, I don't play guitar and I knew who he was. And I just think his like he's going up against somebody who has done
Yeah,
so much.
right. I mean, we had the
And
same problem with Corey Wong last week. Like, if you know
yeah.
guitar, you know who he is for sure. But outside of that niche, mm,
Yeah, I mean, I think he's gotta be a little lower than Corey Wong too, just based on, like, Corey Wong got some points for his, like, not social media, but his, like, YouTube creator
sure, yeah,
status
and podcaster and all that
and
fun stuff.
podcasts and all that stuff, which I don't see too much coming from Eric Gales.
Yeah, I mean, but he does do well on the blues charts at least. I mean, I'd be
Yeah,
okay giving him
charting,
a half a
award
point.
winning. I think a half a point is fair.
All right, breadth of work, Dick Dale, 9 albums, 5.5 points. I can't find anything on sales,
No, me neither. I looked, I can't find anything.
which usually
Uh
means there's not much to speak of here.
yeah, and I would assume that there's not. Uh based on the time frame, based on all of the things that tap into the 60s and like you mentioned the brick wall that was the British invasion.
Mhm.
I think we're safe to maybe take up some points away for sales.
I mean, probably close to a half a point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Miserloo must have sold. There must be significant sales of that song, enough to maybe not take the full away.
I mean, but
But
here's the thing, did Miserloo sell where did Miserloo sell? Did Miserloo sell as part of the
uh,
Pulp Fiction soundtrack? Because I don't
I
know,
don't
does
know.
that count?
I don't
Because I
know.
feel like that's where it could
It's
have
obvious
sold.
it's obviously a well-known song. Like,
It's
it
a
has
well-known song.
pervaded the cultural zeitgeist. It is played enough that people know what it is, or even if you don't know what it is, you know it.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I don't know, do you
Um,
take away point 4? I mean, that's all I'm arguing is point 0.4 instead of a half a point.
yeah, let's take away point 4. Here's what I'll tell you. The soundtrack for Pulp Fiction, which includes Miserloo and was a prominent song on it, went 3 times platinum.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that's where most of the sales for Miserloo went
That's
because
possible.
that's when the song became uber famous.
Mhm.
So Eric Gales
He's starting
has
with 6.1 points for his, I think,
yes,
17 records.
yeah, many, many, many records for Mr. Gales.
Were we gonna give our points to Dick Dale at all?
Oh, we should do that. That's a good point.
I'm gonna give him point 0.1 just to spoil that.
Here's the thing. I'm not going to give him points. And
Sure.
it's not because I didn't like his stuff. It's because so much of it is covers in the sample size that we got. And even though his originals were very good,
Mhm.
the covers mixed with the just a little bit too much cringe on that third album, I'm going to give him a blanket even from me.
Okay. Then Eric Gales, we can move on. Look, I don't even know what the saving grace of his sales is. We love him, but
No, we'll take away
there's
half
not.
point. We'll
Yeah,
take away the half point. I
you
mean, I think
lose
it's
the
fair.
half
I
point.
don't have anything to add for that.
Yeah. But we will give him back some points here, I'm sure. How many points
Yeah.
would you like to give him for quality?
Uh if all 3 of his albums were the quality of Crown,
Mhm.
I could legitimately talk about giving him a point 0.5. That is how much I enjoyed that album.
Sure. Yeah, it was
However,
really good.
the other 2 weren't quite as good,
Mhm.
and so I will give him a point 0.4.
And for similar reasons, I will give a point 0.3. And then we move on to instrumental talent. And here is the thing. These are
Nick,
both
you've been
good
called out
scores.
to show people your guitar playing, by the way.
I am not as good as either of these guys, not even close.
That's fair. That's fair. I do not play the guitar. I'm strictly a vocalist who
Right.
has tried for years to learn other instruments, and it's
And
like
nails the
Greek to
kazoo.
me. I do nail the kazoo. Mostly a vocal
Yeah.
instrument, but I'll take it.
All right. But I mean, here's the thing, like both of these guys, their credentials, their skills are pretty impeccable on the instrument. Um, you'd be hard pressed to find guitar points to take away.
I definitely don't think you can.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean,
um,
they're both very different, but very talented.
Yeah, so, I mean, at
And
that point, we're just talking about the bands behind them and the vocals that they bring to the table each, where Gales does fare a little stronger on that,
I think Yale's
in my
fares a little
opinion.
stronger in both of those categories, to be
Yeah.
honest. I think the band, the backing band around him is
Yeah, no, I agree
showcased a
with
little
you.
more, and he's definitely a stronger vocalist. So,
Yeah.
it just depends on
So,
where we want to
both of these
go.
scores are gonna be high.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, realistically, like, I think the floor is a 7, and I'm not saying that's where either of them should be.
Yeah, it's
I'm saying
definitely the
that's
floor.
the floor of this one.
I could go a full point higher as our starting point, honestly. Um,
Yeah, I could see that. I could see Dick Dale getting an 8 and
yep.
maybe Eric Gale's getting like an 8.5 or an 8.6.
And that's what I'll do. And I'll give the 8-6 because it's
Sure.
nice to not have these round numbers on the zeros and fives all the time.
I like it. That's why we have the
Yeah.
whole spectrum.
And now songwriting. I think both artists do have strengths to bring to the table. You've mentioned the
Sure.
repetitiveness of surf rock. It is a fully unique sound that Dick Dale brought into the cultural zeitgeist.
This
Like
is the
it
this
is
is the
like
tough part.
it's where do you balance the amount of covers versus the amount of innovation and essentially starting a new genre of music.
Yeah.
And then you do look at his stuff from the 90s, and I will say this, if we were grading him just on his 90s albums, just by virtue of differentiation within the tracks, he would be above average.
I completely agree. I completely agree with what you're saying.
So
It's
about 4 of his 9 albums or 3 or 4 of his 9 albums are coming in as stronger than the average in terms of that.
I I agree. I think for me, I will say that to kind of simplify this formula in all of the categories of things, I'm going to cancel the sheer innovation of surf rock with the repetitiveness. I'm going to say
Okay, that's fair.
those become a wash, and
Sure.
then it's strictly quality versus covers, and that's it.
Okay.
I think because of that, I think I would give Dick Dale a score in like the 5-9 range.
That seems like plenty to me. I'm good with that, and I can move on. Eric Gales, I mean, he plays he's not breaking new ground in the way that Dick Dale was,
No,
but he writes really, really well for guitar, and he definitely each album was different. I think his differentiation, his ability to incorporate other genres grew stronger as he aged. I do think his albums have a would most of his albums in and of themselves would qualify as being above the average in songwriting talent, I think.
I fully agree. I think the worst of the three, the first album, is an album I could easily see above a 5.5. And I think he got exponentially higher as he went.
Sure.
And I think if that's the trajectory of his album writing, this is a very strong score for me.
Yeah,
This is
I
somebody who
mean
got me to enjoy an 8+ minute track where there's not a ton of vocal.
right.
There's some vocal, but it's not
Yeah,
like it's 8 minutes of pure singing. There's a lot of instrumental parts.
there are.
And The Crown is just so good.
I
Like, I'm
agree.
trying to
I
not
agree
just
with you. I
weigh
really
that.
like the fact that his sound did seem to change fully by that
Yeah.
album as well.
And I'll tell you what, like, seriously, as we get into this a little more even, the fact that he collabed with Gary Clark Jr., like, I know the style of music that Gary Clark Jr. is putting
Yeah,
out.
it
We
would be a
fucking
great.
loved Gary Clark
Oh, yeah,
Jr.
and honestly, the 2 of them together is perfect.
Yeah. I could see this score being, like, not crazy, like, I'm not talking, like, 9s or 8s,
Yeah, no, I know,
but
but
in the 7s,
in the
I
7s, I
think
think is right on.
yeah, I think, like, maybe, like, even a 7.4.
I'm with you pretty much. I was gonna type in a 7.3, and then you said that, and so I put in a 4, and I have no disputes.
I love that.
Poetic talent. Okay, Dick Dale's
This
not
is
writing a lot of lyrics,
yeah,
although, I
this is
mean, in
where
the
there's gonna be a
90s, he
big
writes more They're passable.
Sure. The lyrics in the 90s, if you take away the spoken word part of the cover
Sure.
and you
Yes.
don't count that as a lyric, which I won't.
Yeah.
I'll be
No,
very nice here,
I agree.
and just base it on his original tracks in that album, I would say those are like almost average. I
Right,
would
I
say
would be
they're
putting
like
them
a
around 5.
4.8, 4.95, all that. I'd be comfortable there.
Mhm.
The problem is a lot of Dick Dale stuff is instrumental, and
Correct.
all the stuff that's not
And
instrumental is
his
almost exclusively covers.
yeah, his most innovative songwriting is instrumental.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, but for Mine's Blue, I don't count ha, ha, ha as a
Ah!
lyric.
Alright. I mean, it's controversial.
You're right. You're right. I mean, I'm
I
gonna
mean, what
try to be
number do
really generous here. A like a 2?
I was thinking 2 as well. 2 is right
Yeah.
on. Eric Gales, on the other hand, I think started out fine, and
Yeah.
then his 3rd album was good. Like,
Yes.
if I am noticing how good your lyrics are on my first listen through of your music, that's saying something.
That is very true. And I think again, I think first album is similar to Dick Dale, is similar to Dick Dale's last album.
Yeah.
I would be anywhere from like a 4.8 to a 5.1.
Mhm.
It's right around there. Second album, I'm higher. I'm closer to a 5.5 to in the 5.5, 6 range. That last album
It's
is
quite good.
yeah. That last album purely on its own merit is in the nines for me.
Mm,
And I think you then like coupling that with the rest of the stuff,
sure.
I think we boil down to a similar area in like the sixes to sevens range
Yeah, I
for
mean,
me.
it could be a 6.9. It
A
could be a 7.
6.9, a 6.9 to a 7 works for me. I think there's one thing we got to keep in mind, and it's that there's like 17 of these albums,
That's
and the
true.
difference
I'll
is
give him a
they're
7.
all originals
I'll give him the
or
7.
vast majority originals.
I'll give him a 7.1.
I love it. I love it.
You would just keep rolling. All right, and that brings us to X Factor. I'm gonna go with Eric Gales first here because I think there's less to say. Did you have
There
something that you would like
is.
to?
I didn't. I was looking. I thought like I mean the child prodigy stuff is really cool.
It's yeah, but
Like
is
the
that
Joe
almost
Bonamassa.
his cultural impact points
Yeah, like
as
I
minimal
don't
as they
think there's
were?
anything here that straight up is like Eric Gales gets X Factor. I think Eric Gales is definitely somebody who, you know, if we did like end of season awards here,
Yeah.
Eric Gales is definitely somebody who would get that wait and see.
Oh
Because
yeah.
I think he's the right level. Like Corey Wong is phenomenal.
Yes.
And he's still young and he still is like going to have multiple
By the
successes in
time
his
he's Eric
career.
Gales' age, he'll probably have like 35 albums out.
That well, that's true. The pace he works at is
It's insane.
ridiculous. But he is somebody who, it seems like he's in his stride comfortably.
Mhm.
He'll continue to put out those albums. They'll be wonderful. Musicians will love him. Eric Gales, like through the last like 5 or so years, has really started to like break the ground a little bit.
Oh yeah,
Of like
sure.
he's charting better. He's getting some award recognition. He's getting these things. And I think, you know, 10 years from now, this is an artist who might get X Factor.
Okay.
If his trajectory continues.
Sure.
So,
All right, so I'll put
but
a
none
0
now.
then.
Yeah,
Dick Dale
none for now.
definitely gets some. I mean, I mentioned a
Sure.
bunch of things, the Library of Congress Award, the technology innovations, the tremolo picking popularization, the surf rock stuff. Um, I think that all amounts to something. It's just how
Yeah.
much something. Um,
Creating a genre has typically been
2
2 points.
points, but surf rock is a little bit more niche. It's a little more subgenre-y.
Yeah.
I think it's more like point something points.
Point something points.
Yeah, I mean, for surf, like it would be one thing if it was like a major branch of rock music, like blues rock, or something that branches off and becomes distinct, like heavy metal or even progressive
Okay.
rock, which has an extremely wide array of artists and styles within it.
So how about this? I would say X Factor will take a little bit of Pulp Fiction.
Okay,
We'll sprinkle in a little bit of the technological
sure.
advances and those little cool niche stories. We'll sprinkle in a little bit of the genre creation.
Hmm.
We'll slap a two in in that category.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Man. So let me tell you before I announce the scores. Last week, it was point 0.1 difference.
Yeah.
This week, we that the number between our artist scores is growing exponentially. It is now point 0.2 points that
Oh my
separate their
god.
final scores.
Okay. It can't Nick, I need you to understand something.
Go ahead.
I just I understand. I don't want you to change anything.
I'm not going to change anything.
If for the second week in a row, I have to say congrats to the person who won, but I will be very upset.
Well, I'll tell you, coming in second place this week with a score of 29.9. Oh, I thought you were
Uh-huh.
going to say a thing.
You said coming in, did you say second place or first place? Oh yeah. Wah, wah, wah. I'm
Oh,
just too
do I
nervous.
announce first place normal? I don't
You
remember.
normally announce first place because there's only
I
two of
don't know
them.
what's going on. But second place is Eric Gales.
God.
I
Mm.
knew. Yeah. 29.9 is a pretty damn good losing score.
That's a great score for somebody who a lot of people may never have heard of.
Correct.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And with a 30.1, based on the math that I alluded to earlier, Dick Dale has won this episode. Thank you for your
Uh,
contributions to musical history.
yes. I'm not upset that Dick Dale won because he deserved the recognition. I just really liked Eric Gales, man. I really
Me
liked
too.
listening to his stuff.
Me too.
But yeah, congratulations to Dick Dale. Congratulations to Eric Gales. I
Absolutely.
mean, seriously, I would like Eric Gales is definitely somebody who, based on the lyrics I listened to and the tracks that I heard and the stories that I read while I was doing research, he's a dude I would love to sit down and talk to one day.
Oh, for sure.
I mean,
For sure.
like, I know we often say, like, come on the podcast, but like,
Yeah.
Eric Gales is somebody who I would love to have a conversation with
I
about, like,
almost
what is
wonder
it
if
like?
mm,
Are you going to just call him right now?
no, I was gonna say I don't know if I'll be able to look this up in time, but I wonder if he was ever on an episode of the Wong Notes podcast, because I could
Oh,
totally see that being the case.
that could be
Saturi
interesting.
it's just going through, looking at the track listing for the Wong Notes podcast. It's Satriani, Schofield, Eric Johnson, um, let's see, all unplayed. There's some pretty good ones on here. Bela Fleck, George Benson,
I know based
Ron
on
Carter,
when
Steve
we
Jordan,
covered
Tosin
when
Abasi,
we covered Corey Wong last week, and I asked
Joe
for like
Walsh,
some
Pat Metheny.
examples to gauge the caliber of artists that he got on the podcast.
Yep.
Eric Gales definitely fits that bill of like
Oh, yeah.
just below the mainstream,
Yeah,
but
although a
still
lot of them
very popular and
are
talented.
definitely very popular.
Yeah.
Um, shoot. Robin Ford, Linda Perry, John McLaughlin, Carlos Santana, Nile Rodgers, Victor Wooten, Eric Gales. Yes, there's an episode from May
Uh
25th, 2022. Eric Gales with Corey Wong on the Wong Notes podcast. I'm going to listen to that.
yeah, I was about to say I know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, hey, listen, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. Always a pleasure.
Yes.
A really, really strong episode this week.
Indeed. And I'm hoping next week will be equally strong. And here's what I'll say about it. The guitarists on next week's episode, without giving it away, one is going to break the formula because by far the most popular and famous thing he's ever done, the thing he is most famous for, and it's not even close, is a live album instead of a studio album. And the other one is way more famous for having a brother who played guitar.
Good. I love that. Love both of that. I
Yeah.
mean, hey, why not?
That's what I
But
got.
hey, here's what I'll tell you. I would like to thank you all for hanging out with us. Thank you for listening each and every week. If you're, some of the select few who tune into our weekly streams of these episodes, love that as well. If you are one of those people or you want to become one of those people, you can find us at Totem Podcast Network on most major streaming services. We're on Kick, we're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, hanging out, having a good time. We like to stream on Thursdays. I say on a Wednesday, but we're doing our best to get close to consistent, which is all you can really ask.
That's right.
But whatever instrument you use to listen to us by, whether it is live video, recorded
Kazoo.
video, or audio, or kazoo, have a great day. And fuck Jerry Lee Lewis.
Always.
Always.
Just
Always.
always be fucking Jerry Lee. Never take your dick out of him.
Or your Dale.
That's right.
Oh, man.
So I think we have to just decide right now. I actually listened to this album like a week and a half ago, but still, we have to decide right now. Do we just do Frampton Comes Alive as his middle album? Like, has any human being ever heard a Peter Frampton studio song?
I
It's
think
sold like over 10 million copies. Hold on, let me look.
here's the problem with not doing it. We're going to talk about it. So whether we do it or not, we're going to talk about it. So I think we just do it.
So he did have one album right after Frampton Comes Alive go platinum. But Frampton Comes Alive went 8 times platinum. It's one of the best-selling live albums of all time.
Yeah, I think you can.
It's in the Grammy Hall of Fame. Yeah, I mean,
I think we can justify breaking formula for it.
I think we just have to do Frampton Comes Alive. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
mean,
knew
because
the
here's
day
the
would
thing.
come when we would cover him, and we would have to make that decision because the fact that it's even something that we're talking about.
Right, and it's going to be something we talk about on the episode because it's going to factor into. I mean, that album alone saves him from any negatives in sales. If not that I think he would hit them, but and it will in fact catapult him into some positives in sales, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I get it. I'm with you.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, we'll
Good.
just cover.
Then we're agreed. Who would you like, by the way? I took Dick Dale because of the ease of research this week, but you can have whoever you want.
It does seem like both of these artists will be relatively easy.
Yeah, I think the last 4 that we have should all be relatively easy to research.
Yeah.
Oh, and of
That makes
these
sense.
4, only one of them was on Rolling Stone's list. Of these 8, I think only 3 were on Rolling Stone's top 250 guitarist list.
I know Dick Dale was in the older versions. I don't remember if he was on.
I don't know for sure. I was just assuming that he must have been.
Sure. Which
if Dick Dale is not on the list, that would be
assumption.
crazy. So that means Keith Urban, Dick Dale, and BB King are the only people here who made the list. What?
I mean, what a sucker punch right to the gut that just was. That sentence was for me.
What?
After waxing poetic about Eric Gales and the knowledge that we have of Corey Wong.
And
my gosh.
Peter Frampton, a guy who is super famous for playing the guitar, Jimmy Vaughn, Buckethead, another guy who is like super famous only for being a guitarist, for like putting out a million different instrumental studio albums, for having like, hardcore music addicts who like fucking fight over his like 8-track bootlegs and shit.
I'm gonna take Peter Frampton.
You got him.
Because I think you'll have more appreciation for the Jimmy v. Stevie Ray conversation in your research. Like, not that I wouldn't, but I think you'll have a little more.
Mhm.
And I also know Peter Frampton better.
Yeah, me too.
Well, yeah, I feel like most people might.
I think so.
Oh man. Oh man. All right. I'm gonna
Yes,
roll
I agree.
because I got something to do at 7.
Excellent.
So this this was good. I guess I'll talk to you.
When you do,
Yeah, at some point. At some point. Go
live my dreams.
yeah, go live your dreams. Go
I'll do
enjoy.
my
I
best.
mean, get ready for bed, I guess.
Yeah, well, I have animals to take care of, so
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
yeah.
All
All
right,
right.
cool. Adios, man.
Adios.
And if you're one of the people who hung out with us, adios to you as well. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being part of the stream. If you find us later on YouTube, welcome. Thanks for hanging out. Then go check out all the rest of them. Other than that, have a great day.